It's time to start. Jordan, if you would tell us who is on WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholm, Legislative Research. Looking online here, I see Representative Long. I see Tuck Duncan online and Representative Carmichael, along with staff who have attended online, and Jason Long from the Reviser of Statutes.
Thank you. Tuck, are you on? Tuck Duncan.
Yes, I'm here, Mr. Chairman. I'm alive and well, believe it or not.
Well, we're waiting to see your smiling face come on the screen. We want to.
Well, I see it here.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you're thrilled. There you are. There you are. Just want to wish you the best. We understand that you've had a little struggle here in the last few weeks.
Mr. Chairman, I survived 2 weeks in the hospital. I was vaccinated. I'm old and vulnerable, but after sucking down a lot of oxygen, they let me go, and so I had COVID pneumonia, and I'll still be in isolation for a while. So, but I'm here to answer any questions you might have or just to watch, and I appreciate the opportunity to participate. Hell, I'm just glad to be alive.
Well, we're glad you're alive, and we're glad that you're with us today. Some people mentioned that you're just too mean to die, and that's probably some truth to that.
My wife said that. Yeah.
But no, I just wanted to let you know that, we had prayers for you, and we're glad to see you, and we're looking forward to you coming back to committee when session starts.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is John Carmichael on?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry for our friend Tuck Duncan, but it does prove one thing, Mr. Chairman. That is that alcohol and strong drink does not confer immunity to COVID.
Are you on your way here, Representative?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was delayed getting away from Wichita. I'm about Emporia on the Turnpike, so I'll see you shortly. All
right. Well, I've made a statement that I was not going to sign a voucher for you until you showed up. So,
and that's as it should be, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Well, good. And Marty, you're on.
Yes,
Marty
Mr.
Long,
Chairman.
Okay. Well, we've got two of our members on WebEx. We have a sufficient number to start. So we're going to start. As I mentioned at the last meeting, we had some requests of research to supply us information on different subject matters. They've done an excellent job. Jordan is to be complimented, and the staff down there, and of course Matt with the reviser keeps us out of trouble most of the time. But I did have him send out on November the 2nd. The Special Committee on Liquor and Law Modernization Committee research topics, and eventually I'm just going to get down to and we'll go through those and see if there's any recommendations. But first, we did ask the legislative research to do a thing regarding home delivery, and they've submitted a document to us. And Jordan, I understand we have someone here that will brief us on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Leanne Thone, who is a research analyst with our office, she is prepared to present on this today if you'd like her to discuss the memo.
Thank you. Please.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The first thing in your folder after the agenda should be a memo from KLRD. And this is a survey of state legislation regarding home delivery of alcohol. So specifically, this is looking at the sale of alcoholic beverages by off-premises liquor licensees like liquor stores, grocery stores, and convenience stores, and on-premises licensees such as restaurants as part of a food order. And it's also looking at who may deliver, so that includes third-party services. We found that 20 states currently allow for home delivery of mixed drinks from restaurants and other appropriately licensed establishments. 21 states limit delivery to alcohol sealed by the manufacturer. 25 states allow for home delivery of alcohol through a third-party contractor or service, and 7 states do not allow for any type of local home delivery of alcohol to consumers. So if you have questions about specific states and what their rules are, the rest of the document is basically a table of each state and what their rules are in terms of what can be delivered from where and by who. And then we also have the relevant statute or bill so that you can look into that further if you would like. This document is also on the KLRD website, ks.gov, and it is under this committee tab. I'm happy to answer questions if there are any.
Questions of the conferee as research as to the document that she submitted? Seeing none, any questions on WebEx? Seeing none, the document says what it says. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I was looking for the minutes. Connie, do we have the minutes from the last meeting? Oh, they're going to hand them out now. Well, you're special. They'll be handing out the minutes from the last meeting because we'll need approval of those, and they're coming out now. Take just a minute or two and go through those and make sure that you know what's in them. Do I have a motion as to the amendment? Representative Reese.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Senator Dietrich. Any discussion on the minutes? I apologize for getting them out late, but apparently Senator Dietrich has gotten them earlier, so she had a good chance to go through them. No further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same. Appear the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Minutes are approved. We're going to go through these topics, and this is just for discussion. And then probably in the after our break at lunch, we will come back, and then I will ask for recommendations. It will give you an opportunity to go back through the written testimony and kind of marry those up with each of these topics. On occasion, when I go through some of these, I'm going to ask Jordan to kind of give us an overview of what his take is. So we'll just, I'm going to kind of skip around. The first one I want to take up is the state fair, which I'm taking it up because last year the Senate actually passed the bill. The House did not get an opportunity, and I'd like to look to Senator Alley if he would like to discuss that Kansas State Fair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, the State Fair for several years has had a place where they could consume wine and beer at the State Fair in an enclosed area. And they had requested this year to expand that area, also allow them to, by doing that, they also allow them to expand perhaps the number of vendors that would be doing that. The Senate passed that and passed it on to the House. And I've talked with Ed Berger, who was over that with the State Fair, and he definitely thinks that would be a good thing for the State Fair and for Kansas. So.
And if I recall, we had some testimony on that, and there was no opposition to that. And had the House received it in a timely manner, we would have probably had hearings on it. But the first time we got to see it was in conference committee, and I was uncomfortable agreeing to it without having my side of the House review it. So I would anticipate when we start taking motions that there will be a motion to recommend to the appropriate committees in the House and the Senate that a bill be drafted similar to the one that was drafted last year and passed by the Senate. And in fact, since it is a holdover year, we still have that Senate bill. So it may be that the House will just take it up and at the very beginning of session and try to get that through. Senator, if that would be agreeable to you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I don't see any problem with that. I would like you to go through perhaps a couple of questions there. It was Senate Bill 2, I believe they were talking about, and what changes would be looking at. And then the second part of that was, are there sampling requirements and restrictions for the micro distilleries at the State Fair?
Thank you. Then I'm going to look to Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just touching on a couple of the provisions of the bill, as Senator Alley said, it would expand where the beer and wine can be consumed during the State Fair. Currently, it has to be on the premises, the licensed premises of the temporary permit holder. So the bill would allow the State Fair Board to designate an area that was broader than those licensed premises, kind of similar to a common consumption area. The boundaries of that area would have to be designated on a map. They'd have to have barriers indicating where it was. The bill also makes some changes to the alcoholic liquor enforcement tax. It directs that a portion of the tax revenue from the sales at the State Fair would go to the State Fair Capital Improvements Fund. So under the bill, 70% of the tax revenue from both the 8% retail sale enforcement tax and the 10% drink sale enforcement tax would be credited to the State Fair Capital Improvements Fund.
Thank you. Was that helpful, Senator? Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions as to the bill that the Senate passed last year on the Kansas State Fair common consumption area? Seeing no questions, we'll move to the next area. Again, we're going to go back to the wine. What is the current law concerning permitted activities on farm winery licenses? Question 2 is there a conflict between the farm winery, Kansas grown products reduction, and the tax credit eligibility? Again, I'll look to Matt.
So to kind of recap some of what my memo talked about with this. So current law authorizes a tax credit for the first 5 taxable years commencing after a taxpayer opens their business. The tax credits for 20% of the cost of liability insurance for a registered agritourism operator who starts an agritourism activity. So the Secretary of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism maintains a list of all registered agritourism operators, the activities that they've registered, and the location of those activities. So farm wineries that are operating as an agritourism activity can register as an agritourism operator and be eligible to receive that tax credit. So before July 1st of this year, farm wineries were required to use at least 30% of Kansas-grown products in the production of domestic table wine and fortified wine. During the session, Legislature passed HB 2137 that reduced that percentage to 15% after July 1 up until January 1 of 23. After that date, there will be no Kansas-grown product requirement in the production of that wine. So that could potentially allow a farm winery that did not grow any products in Kansas to register as an agritourism operator and receive the tax credit for liability insurance costs associated with an agritourism activity. I think to the extent that creates a conflict is kind of the decision of the policymakers, whether that, there's not a requirement that I'm aware of for the secretary to check or verify the agritourism activity. So whether there are changes that are necessary, but it could be a potential that an entity could have no Kansas-grown products and then also register as a agritourism activity and be eligible for the tax credit.
Okay, now that was a change we did last year when we reduced the percentages, correct? And
Yes.
then it would go away.
So right now, it's still 15%.
Still 15%.
There is a requirement. January 1 of 23 is when that requirement goes away.
Right. So, any discussion as to this area? Yes, Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have two different opinions from the Attorney General that agribusiness is agribusiness. And we also have several of our larger counties that are trying to enforce business building codes on these agribusinesses in order to get their liquor license that should come automatically with the farm winery for a drinking establishment or a CMB license. And so the Attorney General says that is not the intent of this law. I'd like to take a look at, I'd like to make a recommendation that we farm wineries automatically be eligible for a DE license as an agribusiness without regard to any other local building codes or restrictions, and that they automatically be granted a CMB license in the same manner as we do the berry farmers when we pass that bill. I think the intent when we did that bill was to include the farm wineries, but they got kind of skipped over on the deal, so I'd like to make that recommendation.
Discussion from members? There's also another testimony that we received late from Phil Bradley with the wineries. He had a different suggestion. And I think my suggestion to him is to prepare a bill and submit it, and it would be reviewed in due course during our normal business during session. Is there any objection to this recommendation from any of the committee members? Any of the committee members online? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, can you
I think this is Representative Carmichael,
It
and you're
is.
broken
Can
up.
you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
We can hear you now. Go
apologize,
ahead.
all right. If I might inquire, is the intention then to exempt farm wineries from health and safety regulation, for example, capacity limits in the facility? In other words, a fire code that says you can't put 500 people in a space designed for 100, or sanitation codes that say, for example, you have to have hot running water in places that serve beverages. Is there somebody who could enlighten me on what the intent is? The intent really to exempt these facilities from any type of local regulation.
Since it was Representative Tarwater who was making this recommendation, I'm going to refer your question back to the representative.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Mr. Chair. No, that would not be the intent of this. The intent is to keep the farm winery as a farm winery with their current farm winery business restrictions and codes. The problem is that in order to have a, for example, in Johnson County, in order to have a drinking establishment license, you also have to have a sprinkler building. And a lot of these places don't have a sprinklered building, and they don't have the funds to create a sprinkler building in their current building. So they're being denied drinking establishment licenses because the county wants to take control of the agribusiness. And this would all probably come out in the hearing of the bill, but the intent would be to do exactly what the intent of the legislature was in the very beginning, was to allow them to be able to serve other drinks at their parties.
Was that helpful,
And
Representative? Go ahead.
Well, it is yes, Mr. Chairman, it is enlightening, and I appreciate Chairman Carwater's comments, but I'm not sure it resolves what my concern is, and that is that we can't have large occupancies of people in a facility that otherwise would be required to comply with life safety codes and exempt those simply because they can sell farm wine. That's the kind of thing that can result in disasters when those facilities catch fire with hundreds of people in the building. And so I have concerns about the proposal. We can deal with how to deal with the recommendation this afternoon. I appreciate your patience with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative, and we will take those recommendations up, but I would remind you the devil is always in the details, and until a bill is drafted and a committee has an opportunity to review that and take testimony, these will only be recommendations to those appropriate committees that they should explore the possibility. And if some individual drafts a bill, then of course it'll go into the normal process of a committee hearing, and then the bill will be worked. So we will take that recommendation and we'll address it in the afternoon. But thank you, Representative Carmichael and Representative Tarwater, for the discussion.
Thank you for the admonition. I am well familiar with the devil. Thank you.
Some people say you are.
Mr. Chairman?
Representative Tarwater?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You did note that we did receive additional testimony on this type of thing.
We did.
And one of the things that we spoke about quite often in the Commerce Committee this year was how ways to revitalize our urban core and to get people to come in there for business. And so one of the recommendations on that letter that we received was to create some sort of a urban version of the farm winery. I'm not quite sure how that would happen, or you know, if it even can be done through an agri-type business, because it may not even qualify. But it is something I think we should take a look at. The more we can do for our urban core, I think the better.
Living in an urban area, I understand that, and I would encourage you to, if we make recommendations, we may want to send this to Commerce instead of Fed and State. But that's one of the one of the things we'll look at. But Senator Dietrich, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to go back to that tax credit question, if I could.
Yes, please go right ahead.
So if we are phasing out the requirement that you have no Kansas-grown product in Kansas-grown grapes in your product, can someone just refresh my memory on, you are still, if I'm hearing this correctly and understand this correctly, you are still allowed a tax credit, and that's the conflict. So does that, if that's the conflict, do we need to re-look at that bill that we currently have in the tax credit piece? Because I don't think the goal was ever to provide tax credits exponentially.
Senator Alley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My thought on this is that, one of the reasons for this is because in my district, we have a farm winery that wanted to sell product in his farm. He grows elderberries, but he also would like to sell a Merlot. He may not have the grapes on his plot of ground to sell that Merlot, but he could certainly distill it. He certainly could make that grape. And so he was wanting to be able to do that, and that was the reason for that. I don't believe we're trying to say we don't have to grow any product. I don't think you have to say that, but that was the reason for that particular.
Yes, and I recall that conversation. I guess I'm just thinking of, do we need to tighten that up a little bit so that it's very clear that we're talking about Kansas producers being able to receive that tax credit if they still produce something? I mean, I'm getting a little lost in those details.
No, but
Do we need to
those are important details.
Do we need to tighten that up a little bit? Just take another look at that, that's all. Because I completely understand what you're saying. I agree with that.
I'm going to ask Matt, what's his understanding? If you don't grow your own grapes or whatever product, are you still, does that make you ineligible for the tax credit?
No, the growing the grapes is not a requirement. What's the requirement is that you are operating an agritourism activity. And that's not tied to the grapes.
Okay, that's helpful. Okay, anything else, Senator? Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
This is State Senator Tom Holland. Can I chime in here just a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just for a little bit more nuance here. I think the question about the tax credit is very much an appropriate one. I just want to bring to the committee's attention that there are a number of wineries out there like myself. While we do quote unquote grow grapes that we use in our production, it's very minimal, and we rely on Kansas vineyards, separate entities, to supply us our Kansas produce to make our Kansas wines. And so there's really a supply chain team effort here. And I just wanted to remind the committee that is while, my winery pre-COVID, we probably produced about 1,000 gallons of wine a year. And very little of that came from my vineyard, but all of it came from Kansas vineyards. And
Thank you, Senator.
I just want to share the committee with that, because at the end of the day, it's a team effort here where you have the vineyards, the growers, as well as the wineries who are dedicated to promoting the Kansas product, the Kansas grape wine, that are, I think, an integral part of the team of making agritourism work.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. So that's another issue we can discuss this afternoon and make any recommendations. So let's move on to the next area that we're going to look at this afternoon, which is the current law regarding distributors and franchise agreements. We had testimony from a number of people on the franchise agreements. So I'm going to give you that opportunity in a little while to go back to that testimony, so it'll be fresh in your mind, and see if there's any recommendation as to the franchise agreements. Also, we will look at the restrictions what are the restrictions or current law on in-state shipping by farm wineries, microbreweries, micro distilleries. Again, we had testimony on all of those. You may want to go back and review. We had a legislative history and purpose behind the 1987 House sub for Senate Bill 141, allowing retailers to sell and deliver alcoholic beverages to clubs and liquor stores, and that's what we talked about earlier, about there's a conflict between the ABC handbook that says they can buy it anywhere and the statute that restricts them to the the county of residence or an adjacent county, and it gets real complicated what would be considered an adjacent county. Or we would adopt or recommend some statutory change to go along with the ABC handbook, which would allow a club owner to buy his liquor from anywhere in the state of Kansas. And that's an issue that we will take up and look for a motion on whether we recommend a statutory change or that we not recommend a statutory change, and that ABC should change their handbook to reflect what the statute says. And Matt, that's a quick question to you, because you know you brought that up at the last one. That is the statutory language, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, looking at 41308 subsection B, it does say that a retailer's license shall permit sale and delivery of alcoholic liquor and CMB only on the licensed premises, and shall not permit sale of alcohol and CMB for resale in any form except, and that's the exception that it makes, is that a licensed retailer may sell alcoholic liquor and CMB to a temporary permit holder for resale by such permit holder, and sell alcoholic liquor and CMB to a caterer or to the licensed premises of a public venue, club, or drinking establishment if such premises are in the county where the retailer's premises are located or in an adjacent county for resale by such public venue, club, establishment, or caterer. So the issue is that subsection B2, there's a general prohibition, and then that's the exception if it's in the same county or an adjacent county. So that would be the language that would have to be examined if you want to broaden it to any county.
Right. And I believe our testimony was that in the ABC handbook, their interpretation was any county. And so that may be an area that we may want to either make a recommendation on statutory change or not, and then encourage ABC to change their handbook. That'll be up to the committee. I'm going to go back to the back page, and we have some literature that was handed out at the last meeting. What are the Kansas tax rates for liquor and CMB? You've all got a copy of that, Matt? Or Jordan? Go ahead, Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholland, KLRD. If you'll just give me 1 second here, I'll get it pulled up from our memo. So looking back at the liquor and tax rates, we provided a memo during the last meeting where we listed the different tax rates that are applicable to the different regulated beverages. So starting with spirits, there's a gallonage tax of $2.50 a gallon that's due at the time of manufacturing or bottling. With wine, it is 30 cents per gallon on wine that's less than 14% alcohol by volume. So that's unfortified wine, and 75 cents per gallon on wine with more than 14% alcohol by volume, and that's considered fortified wine. And then if there's spirits used in the manufacturing, there's a tax rate of $2.50 per gallon on the spirits that are imported for use in that. Moving on to beer and CMB, we found an 18 cent per gallon tax on beer and CMB. There's 20 cents per gallon tax on wort and liquid malt, 10 cents per pound on malt syrup and malt extract, 30 cents per gallon on hard cider. We also listed the liquor enforcement taxes and drink taxes. So if the chairperson would like me to cover those, I can go ahead, or we can pause if whatever he'd like to do on that.
Any questions so far from committee members? Seeing none, go ahead.
Okay. Looking towards the liquor enforcement tax. So on the sales of alcoholic liquor and CMB, there's an 8% tax levied on those sales, and that's in place of sales tax. It's paid by the purchaser. So if you purchase it from a liquor store, say, that's where that you would pay that, and then it's collected by the seller. That's remitted back to the ABC. We listed the specific sales that's levied on. I won't cover those unless you'd like me to. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and move on to the liquor drink tax. There's a drink tax of 10% on the sales of alcoholic liquor and CMB by certain licensed establishments, including clubs, caterers, drinking establishments, public venues, and temporary permit holders. Of course, that's paid by the consumer and collected by the seller. And then finally, for CMB sales, there's a retail sales tax that's levied on that. So that's separate from that liquor enforcement tax because it's a different category of beverage. So you pay retail sales tax on that instead of the 8% that's levied on other alcoholic liquor. I'd be happy to pause for any questions.
Questions? Being none?
Okay, that concludes the sales
Thank you.
taxes that we.
I would direct the committee, you received a document, it should be in your file, and it's from a number of our organizations: Central States Council for Wine Institute, Standard Beverages, Handcrafted Wine and Spirits, Southern Glazers, and Tuck Duncan, General Counsel, Kansas Wine and Spirits. If you'll note, I think it's on the second line, the federal law regarding alcohol by volume, the ABV, threshold for the federal excise tax has been changed to 16%. Kansas is presently at 14%. There's a recommendation that we adopt the 16% of ABV, and it's one of those things, and everybody's on the same sheet of music. Matt, do you? I thought you had something on this. But that will be one of the motions, motions this afternoon, is whether or not we should suggest that that should be changed from 14 to 16%, which would be the same as the federal law regarding alcohol by volume, which is the federal tax, excise tax on wine. So that'll be an issue that I want you to explore. And there is some testimony from a prior meeting that you may want to go back and look at. If you need any assistance, Jordan or one of his staff will be available to talk to you about it. But did we talk about there was a question on the Kansas tax rate for alcoholic candy. Did you address that? I may have missed that. Jordan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I neglected to mention that. We had discussed it during the meeting, but it wasn't in our memo before that. So if you'll give me just 1 second, I can pull up the information that we'd received from the ABC on that.
Chairman, when we change that, if we do change that from 14 to 16, is there a financial note on that?
Well, we would just be recommending a statutory change, and then a bill would be drafted, and then we would get, at the committee level prior to the hearing, we would have that report.
Is there any estimate?
I'm looking at staff, and they've indicated new to them. Go ahead, Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. So I'll read off the information we received from the ABC about alcoholic candy. We were advised that alcoholic candy is included in the definition of alcoholic liquor. So gallonage taxes are assessed accordingly by the type of alcohol in the candy. It's paid by the in-state manufacturer or the distributor that imports it into the state, as long as it's greater than 0.5% ABV, alcohol by volume. And it says any candy with greater than 1% ABV must be sold by a liquor licensee and is subject to that enforcement tax of 8% or the liquor drink tax of 10%, depending on where it's sold. So that would depend on if it's an on or off premises licensee.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question on that. When you read that like that, does that mean anything less than 0.5% isn't regulated by the ABC?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholland, KLRD. I am unsure if that's the case. I would have to look back at this and see. Oh, yes. Sorry, I didn't go far enough down in the email that we received. It does say that the ABC does not regulate any candy less than 0.5% ABV.
Any questions on the liquor candy? Yes, Representative Reese.
For staff. So does that mean that under 5%, it was discussed that candy can be sold anywhere?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. I'd defer to Matt or the ABC on that question, but they did say that the ABC does not regulate that. So I'm unsure, I guess, who would regulate those sales if it's less than 0.5%, but I'll defer to Matt on that.
So would also defer to Director Beavers, but I'll say two things. One, to clarify, it's 0.5%, not 5%. And then two, so if it's less than 0.5%, it does not meet that definition of alcoholic candy. It could potentially, we have statutes concerning adulterated foods. I'd need to reference those to see if it's under 0.5%, if that would qualify as well. But basically, we have statutes prohibiting individuals from, making changes or corrupting food products and then selling them. So I can reference that, but it would not fall under definition of alcoholic candy. So I don't think that the director would have any regulation over it.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So getting back to my question, under the 0.5% threshold, can a grocery store sell that type of candy? Can an ice cream store sell it? Can, how would it be maintained and recorded?
I don't see anything in our statutes that would require that. So if it didn't meet the definition of alcoholic candy because it was under 0.5%, it wouldn't be alcoholic candy. And so then I can't foresee why the director would be regulating it. And I don't know what would be prohibiting the sale of it in other locations.
Just one more, Mr. Chairman. So there would be no age limit as to who can buy it?
Let me look some more, but I again, I can't think of anything, but let me look.
Is anyone from ABC on WebEx? Anybody from ABC here? No, okay.
Mr. Chairman, this is Representative Carmichael. I think Mr. Duncan is here, and he has particular expertise in that area.
Chuck, are you on?
I can answer this question, Mr. Chairman. You may remember this came up during a conference committee that dealt with this issue. And the problem was we have manufacturers of in Kansas who use less than 0.5% alcohol in the manufacture of their candy. Many times the alcohol itself dissipates through that process. And they were concerned about having to be regulated by the state agency. And so the compromise was the manufacturer at less than 0.5%, which is considered by the TTB as being, quote, non-alcoholic, end quote, would not be regulated, but that any product that had the 1% alcohol and above, which is considered by the federal government as an alcoholic product, would be subject to regulation by the ABC, distribution, payment of tax, and the like. And we had, I believe we had some members of the legislature at that time who actually did make these candies as well, and they were engaged in this process. So that's why the definitions turned out the way they were with the less than 0.5% and the over 1%. And if you go into a liquor store today, you will see that there are alcohol candies using name brands. There's a Jim Beam candy, a whole bunch of them. You will not see very many candies in non-liquor stores, groceries, etc., that actually have an alcohol content per se. And if they do, it's de minimis. That's how we reach that solution. I hope that's helpful.
Senator Alley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what happens between 0.5 or 0.5 and 1%?
Well, my view would be that anything over the 0.5%, which is non-alcoholic, which is the non-alcoholic definition, is regulated by the ABC for the reason that under 41-104, I believe it is, because it says you cannot do anything in Kansas with regard to the sale, manufacture, distribution, et cetera, of liquor unless it is authorized by state law. So in the alcohol candy situation, less than 0.5% is not covered, and 1% above is specifically allowed, and the black hole is probably in between.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question, sir?
It does, and I remember working on that bill, and I wanted to go for a lesser percentage, but as you mentioned, there was a member of the legislature that got it through, because under federal law, anything 0.3 or more under the Food and Drug Administration was considered altered. And so the House passed the bill that it was 0.3, the Senate went 0.5, and it ended up 0.5. But, that senator is no longer with you, though. But with that said, let's move right along. 2019, Senate Bill 13 expanded beer sales by cereal malt beverage licensees and expanded the goods and services retail liquor licensee may sell. Since the enactment in 19, has sale of beer by retail liquor licensee decreased. Similarly, what data are available on the sale of the goods and services by retail liquor licensees since 2019? That was a question that we had testimony to. And Representative Tarwater, is that the area that you wanted to ask about?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to see what the damage actually was done to liquor stores when we made that change to allow grocery stores to sell C&B products. I'm still going through all of the information that was sent, but if you look at the sales tax dollars collected in totality, not just on liquor, but on all items in liquor stores. From the year 2018, we had $1.2 million in sales tax collected for liquor and ice, basically. And that was with 471 stores. In 2020, we had $2.7 million collected, so an increase of over 100%. And there were 639 liquor stores reporting those numbers. If you bring that down to the liquor store level, you're looking at about $2,500 paid out or collected in sales tax per liquor store in 2018 and $4,200 per liquor store in 2020. And so it appears that the deal worked out for liquor stores. They're able to sell other items, and the ones that are good business people are excelling in that, and they have taken advantage of what we gave the liquor stores. And so it was enlightening, and I was happy to hear that.
And that was because of uncorked.
That was because of the uncorked law. So that, if you recall, Mr. Chairman, it was a deal made between the liquor stores and the grocery stores. The grocery stores got to sell C&B products, and liquor stores got to sell tobacco, and they got to sell other grocery items and mixers and things like that. And so it was an agreement that they made, but I kept hearing that liquor stores were kind of taken in the shorts, and I wanted to make sure that that wasn't happening, and it looks like it did not. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Jordan, I just got a text from Debbie Beavers. Did you get that? She was not sent a link to the meeting. So I think it would be important to have her on. Let's go to the last. What impact was recently enacted legislation had on alcohol-related crime? I think that was Representative Carmichael's question. Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you placing that on our agenda for consideration. I did ask legislative research, and Mr. Pinson retrieved additional information for us on some additional categories that were not included in the original materials. And of particular interest would be domestic violence, as well as criminal damage to property. I don't think you have to be an expert to know that when people are drinking, they break things. And I think what that information, in combination with what KLRD provided us earlier, leads to the conclusion that alcohol-related crimes of violence are increasing exponentially in Kansas. We have now data between, I think, about 2015 and 2020. And if you look at the tables that were prepared to show us the percentage change over the years, these crimes are escalating at a rate of about 20-25% per year, which is in an exponential fashion. Now, it's a conclusion that is necessarily the precipitating factor or the causative factor in the increase. There's pretty good bodies of literature out there that suggest when people have been kept at home for 18 months, that has probably influenced the amount of domestic violence. Not that there's violence, it's more difficult living with my wife when we're together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Than it was when we were on a more normal schedule. But the thrust of my remark and my concern is that as we prepare our recommendations, I hope that we will make note of the fact that alcohol is a highly regulated product, that it has a high potential for addiction, and that there appears to be some relationship between at least consumption of alcohol and crime. And I don't know that we have to recommend any specific legislative action, but it's a topic that I think we need to keep on the legislative agenda, because literally people's lives are once again at stake. So I appreciate the opportunity to address that matter.
Thank you, Representative. Let me ask committee, these are the issues that we had research look at. Is there any other issue as it pertains to alcohol that you would like to address today? Yes, Senator Dietrich.
I apologize if we talked about this and I just missed it. We had a little bit of discussion about, and I thought Representative Tarwater, you had mentioned this as well, that we have local, and much like your area, Senator Alley, local microbreweries and small wineries who want to be able to ship directly to an in-state customer and in small quantities, or at least deliver in small quantities. And that was one of the, it says, what restrictions are there in current law on in-state shipping by farm wineries, microbreweries, and microdistilleries? And we're not talking large quantities like in competition with liquor stores, just the local microbrewery or farm winery wanting to deliver a case to the local nursing home, just for lack of a better example. Not that I would encourage it.
If I go to a nursing home,
whatever.
that's the one I want.
Is that even an option?
Let me look to Matt. Yes, Matt.
I'm sorry, I was still looking through the adulterated food.
Okay.
Can the question be repeated, please? I'm sorry.
Sure, so.
Go ahead.
I'm
Go ahead. No,
sorry.
you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead and state your
Okay,
question.
so one of the bullet points on our topics was what restrictions are there in current law on in-state shipping by farm wineries, microbreweries, or microdistilleries? Again, thinking small quantities, small producers.
Sure. So currently, farm wineries are authorized to ship wine in-state if the winery obtains a special order shipping license. Microbreweries and microdistilleries do not have that ability to ship product in state. So under KSA 41350, a winery can obtain a special order shipping license to ship wine directly to consumers. The purchaser has to pay the purchase price and shipping costs to the permit holder, and then enforcement taxes are collected on the purchase price. But again, that's not something that's available to microbreweries or microdistilleries.
Was that helpful?
Thank you. Yes,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Okay, good. Debbie Beavers, are you on yet? Were we able to connect with you? I heard a no somewhere. In the other hearing room. Okay. Committee, I'm going to kind of look at our agenda. We know the subject matters we're going to talk about in the afternoon. And it'll give you an opportunity to go back and explore the testimony that we previously had. What I'm going to propose, and yes, Senator, you have a comment? Okay, go ahead, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that the question just come up in my head was, we have farm wineries that distill the product, but we also have a lot of farm vineyards that may not distill the product. And I want to go back to the tax credit. Do they both get tax credit? If they're both in Kansas, can they both share a tax credit? Can they not share, but do they both get the tax credit?
I'm going to refer that to research.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question. Is Debbie on? Debbie, are you on? Debbie Beavers.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm just barely on here.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it, and we're sorry that they didn't send you the link. That's an oversight. But we had a question here on a tax credit on vineyards. And Matt, are you prepared? Go ahead.
So I want to circle back on agritourism activity, because that's the key piece to be eligible for the tax credit. So I'm just going to give you the definition of agritourism activity, because you have to, in order to be eligible for the tax credit, you have to be operating a registered agritourism activity. And that means any activity which allows members of the general public for recreational, entertainment, or educational purposes to view or enjoy rural activities, including but not limited to farming activities, ranching activities, or historic, cultural, or natural attractions. An activity may be an agritourism activity whether or not the participant pays to participate in the activity, but it can't be if you are paid to participate in the activity. So that's our definition of agritourism activity. You have to have you have to be operating a registered agritourism activity, and that's the piece that makes you eligible for the tax credit. So it's independent of whether you're producing grapes, whether you're selling wine. It's, are you operating a registered agritourism activity?
Chairman, if I may, so the way I hear you say that, it has nothing to do with whether they produce a wine or not. It's whether or not the activity is a registered agritourism activity.
Correct.
Doesn't have anything to do with
Having a
the-
registered agritourism activity is what makes you eligible for the tax credit.
Thank you.
You may have both, but you could have one without you having any vineyards. All right, good. As I was I'm glad to see Debbie's on. We're running a little ahead of time. Without objection, I'm going to ask the committee. I want to take a break now, and instead of coming back at 1, come back at 12:45, because I think we can kick these out and have everybody out of here by 1:30. If that's agreeable to the committee. Yes, Matt.
Can I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just throw in, I was
Oh, the
looking,
question here that you were.
yeah, I was looking for the adulterated food section. So
Right.
we do have a provision relating to this in KSA 65664. So the Secretary of Agriculture regulates adulterated foods. So A food shall be deemed to be adulterated if it's a confectionery and it bears or contains any alcohol in excess of 0.4%. However, the subsection does not apply to any confectionery by reason of its containing not more than 1% by volume of alcohol. So you have a piece that regulates, it deems it adulterated food, but it's got to be more than 1%. And then at that point, then the Secretary of Agriculture could regulate it as an adulterated food.
Thank you for that. You do hard work. I mean, pull it right up.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Carmichael, if I might, since we have Ms. Beavers on the line now, would it be possible for her to address the black hole question that Mr. Duncan raised, which is related to what we're just discussing? But I'd appreciate getting their perspective on how enforcement is handled in that particular percentage range.
And Representative, I'll allow you to do that when we reconvene, when you're here in person. Director Beavers will be on, and I'll give you the mic at that point.
That's fine. I'm entering the parking garage now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Well, we're going to stand in recess until 12:45. Thank you very much, committee. If I could have committee members to return to their seats, I need to advise those folks that are on WebEx, you'll be getting a new invite. The one you had this morning will not work. So if you'll start checking your emails, the invite should be there. And we're going to wait about 5 minutes and make sure that we get some people on our WebEx. Jordan, do you know who's on WebEx, if we have anyone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going from my left on the screen there, I can see Representative Long, I can see Tuck Duncan, I see staff who's in the room with us, Debbie Beavers with ABC, and Jason Long from the Office of Reviser of Statutes. And let me double check, Senator Holland is on there as well.
Thank you. The only committee member is Representative Long, is that correct?
Senator Holland.
And who?
Senator Holland.
He's not on the committee. Oh, I'm sorry, he is. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was thinking something else. But those two are on, Long and Senator Holland. And we have another member coming back, so we have a quorum. During the break, I had researched, just do a quick draft, and I'm going to have the research Jordan to kind of talk about it. You should have it in front of you. It says draft on it. Go ahead, Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we just quickly drafted up some draft recommendations based on the discussion during the morning session. So this isn't meant to be inclusive, and I'd note there are a lot of topics that were discussed that may not be included in here just because I tried to only include what it sounded like were possible recommendations. So of course, these haven't been voted on or anything, but this is just kind of a starting point and a place to start wordsmithing from, if you like. So we have topics from the state fair, farm wineries, urban wineries, and the tax rate on wine. And one other quick note I wanted to make is that there's a typo on the tax rate on wine. It should say KSA 41501B1. I neglected to include the chapter in there, so I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Okay. Just ask Jordan from just our conversations this morning to go through these. There'll be other issues, and we'll go through those. But I just wanted to have something to work from. So let's go back. And I should make a comment that our distinguished representative from Wichita is now here. And I was going to give you the floor because you were on the phone and it was breaking in and out when we were talking about the last issue, which is what impact has recently been enacted with legislation had to do with alcohol-related crime. And I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do have Verizon, so you've heard the commercials. Can you hear me now? The data that we had provided to us at the first meeting, as well as the supplemental data that legislative research provided us concerning alcohol-related crime in Kansas, you can pick just about any category, whether it's murder, rape, aggravated assault, particularly crimes of domestic violence, disorderly conduct, criminal damage to property. Every one of these categories of crime over the past 5 years has increased, but the alcohol-related crime in particular of each of those crimes has increased. And I'm not suggesting to the committee that we have a magic pill or even necessarily a specific legislative recommendation, but I do hope that our recommendations would at least note the fact that this is a highly regulated product because it's potentially an addictive product and because it's a product that can result in violent activity by some individuals. And so I just hope that somewhere in our recommendations that we can make note of the fact that alcohol-related crime in Kansas is apparently increasing and that the legislature ought to be mindful of that as we move toward a modernization of liquor laws into the 21st century, that we at least ought to be careful and aware that there can be collateral effects by increasing the availability of alcohol in Kansas. So I just hope that we'd consider that.
Thank you. Is there any comments as to the representatives? Yes, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I look through this and I see simple assault listed a couple of times in percentages, and is simple assault like a slap in the face? Could it be verbal assault? Can you further define that for me, Representative?
I think I can take a stab at that, and Mr. Finzen from Legislative Research has worked with KBI on gathering these figures, but typically simple assault means that, and I hope I've got this right, that it's not an aggravated assault, i.e. one committed with a deadly weapon or one that results in maiming or the possibility of maiming and serious injury. And so I think what they are talking about here is physical assaults, otherwise in the law known as battery, as opposed to just threats. If I come up to you and I say, Representative, I'm going to hit you in the face, but I don't do it, I've probably committed an assault, but not a battery. But I think what they're talking about here is battery, and if research can clarify it all, I certainly could be wrong.
Does anyone want to field that question? Andrew?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me. I would just point out that the KBI in their statistics provided did not provide a definition of simple assault, so I would defer to legal counsel or.
One, it'll be a misdemeanor. It's not a felony, where an aggravated assault would be a felony. And that's about as far as I'm going to extend myself.
The reason I'm asking that is because we're noticing that at a lot of sporting events recently, there's a lot of verbiage going back and forth that leads to physical assault and probably alcohol involved. And I just kind of wondered categorically where those would fit in. And so I think I've got the, from Mr. Representative Carmichael about the battery part of it. It kind of clarifies that for me.
And Mr. Chair, from my perspective, I don't know that it's all that important. It is, but it's not important what we're looking at, whether or not the assault leads to a battery. It's the violent and intimidating conduct, whether physical contact occurs or whether, fortunately, it diffuses before somebody gets hurt. The issue is still the same. People who are drinking get in fights.
But it should be noted that, these statistics show that there's been an increase. Alcohol may have been a contributing factor, but it may have been other things too. I mean, we've just went through a lockdown with COVID and a number of other things, and domestic violence are up, being locked.
Now, there's a large body of literature in the criminal justice field. I know you've read it. I read it when I was in school, about how do you tie an increase in crime to one particular factor when it's multifactorial. But we know that alcohol plays a big role. You're looking at roughly a quarter of these crimes are committed by somebody who's been drinking.
But you also have to note that in the summertime, when it's hot, and folks that live in small houses may not have air conditioning, their tempers are short, and it also works in the wintertime when people can't get out, domestic violence goes up. When they're living in the same house and they can't get out and about.
And it may have cut out when I was on the WebEx, but I think I said in my own house, well, there's no violence. If you've met my wife, you'd understand that the last thing I want to do is tangle with that woman. But seriously, yeah, I think all of us understand it's been more difficult in our domestic relations when we're there 24/7.
And I would not ask for a motion, but we would all agree that your wife is probably one of the most tolerant people in the state of Kansas.
I'm a very lucky man, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You are that. So I'm going to start going through these issues. I think the things that we talked about with the farm wineries, I think Jordan did a good job, and they're in one issue, but I'm going to take up the state fair, and I think there will be a motion to recommend legislation on that. And I would look to Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that the committee recommend that the standing committee in the House review Senate Bill 2 and consider that next year.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second, Representative or Senator Dietrich. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. That will be a recommendation. Next, I'm going to go to the farm wineries, and I would recognize Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we discussed this fairly this morning, and I would just move the motion that's written here.
Thank you. The motion has been made to recommend the farm wineries that are listed on the preliminary report of the draft report. I would take a second to that. Senator Alley? Oh, I'm sorry. Was it you, Tom? Okay. Oh, go ahead and ask a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I understand this right, if a producer has a license for a vineyard already, and then he requests a license for CMB, that's an automatic approval. Is that what this is saying?
Yes, that's, Mr. Chairman. Yes, that's what this is saying, just like we did for the berry farmers. They wanted to be able to serve their own wine, but also serve beer. And so we automatically included a CB or a CMB license with that.
So with that, and that said, there should not be a requirement for local building code. Would there be a local building code review?
There should not be, and the intent in the statute says there should not be. But when they also are allowed to request a DE license so they can serve spirits and alcohol and beer that is more than 6%. And so when they do that, the county is then saying, well, you need sprinklered buildings, or they want to interject all the county codes for a drinking establishment, when the intent of the law was to allow them to have a DE license if they requested it.
So if that's the case, if there were no additional modifications to their facility, there would be no reason for a building code interpretation at that point. Is that what you're talking about?
You are correct, sir. But
Thank you.
It's not how it's working.
And remember, these are only recommendations to the appropriate committees to possibly introduce a bill, and then they'll have a hearing, and if they are passed out, they'll be voted on by both bodies. Do I have a second on?
I have a second.
Well, let me get a second, then I'll have discussion. I have a second. Discussion? Yes, Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate you running the meeting according to the rules. I apologize, I got a little quick there. I'm not going to make friends maybe with everybody in this room, but if I get a license from the ABC to run a retail liquor store, I don't think that means that I now have carte blanche authority to disregard the building code. If I get a license from the ABC to operate a drinking establishment, I don't think that gives me carte blanche permission to not have sufficient parking, to not have sufficient bathrooms, to not have hot water, to disobey the occupancy requirements that apply to most commercial establishments, how many people you can have based upon the number of square foot, et cetera. And I want to encourage agribusiness and I want to encourage farm wineries, but I don't think that just because the ABC licenses you, that that should be the end all of the inquiry, because that's not what the ABC is out there inspecting for. They're there to enforce liquor laws, not public health and safety laws, i.e. building codes. Kansas is a local controlled state. If the county commissioners want to require fire sprinklers at tremendous expense to retailers or to wineries or anybody else, then they answer at the polls for that decision in the next election. But I don't think that we should equate a quote-unquote liquor license with an occupancy license. So I don't think this is necessarily a good idea. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Further discussion? I have a motion and a second. No further discussion. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no? Very well. Does either no wish to be recorded? Thank you, because these are only recommendations. Very well. The motion passes as to the farm wineries. As to the tax rate on wine, I believe there's a motion from Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reading the recommendations from the group on the undersigned to align the state of Kansas tax rate up to the 16% federal rate, I move that we align ourselves with the federal rate of 16%.
Thank you. Is there a second? Representative Tarwater seconds. Discussion on this issue. Seeing no discussion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Here's to the chair that the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The recommendation passes. I want to take one other issue up, and that has to do with the purchase of liquor by a bar from any liquor store in the states. To get clarification, we could either leave it the way it is, where you have to get it in that county or the adjacent county, or because there is a conflict with the ABC guidebook, for lack of a better term, says that they can buy it anywhere. On this one, the chair is going to make a recommendation that there be statutory changes, a bill introduced to correct and then allow the bar to buy from any licensed liquor store in the state of Kansas. A free market deal. That's my motion. Is there a second? Second, Representative Tarwater, discussion. Yes. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Does this include delivery by retailers to the drinking establishment? Or does this mean that the drinking establishment from Lakin can come to Wichita to buy their booze and then transport it back to Lakin? Or are we talking about the liquor store in Wichita sending a large truck on a route through western Kansas, putting local liquor stores out of business?
That's not part of the recommendation. I recommended that a bill be introduced, and then it will go through the committee process. And after it goes through the committee process, should it pass, and those are the finer details that will be worked out in the committee process.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Yes, Senator?
Could somebody just refresh my memory? Was this an issue in our western Kansas counties not having the ability to find a liquor store that was in an adjacent county to purchase the liquor from?
I think that and the other part of it was there was an understanding because they read the ABC guidebook, for lack of a better term, and they thought that they had to buy. They could buy anywhere. And then when the statute was, during this last hearing, I believe it was the last hearing, Matt kind of clarified that and said, no, they must buy in their county or the adjacent county. And of course, the determination of what an adjacent county was, my understanding, and I looked at Matt, was unclear. It had to be connecting to that county. Would that be correct, Matt?
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of clarification, I think we had Secretary Beavers define adjacent counties and how this thing worked before, and now we're seeing there's a conflict in the handbook versus what your recommendations are. Can she have input on this to see what exactly, I'm kind of unclear on this issue, Mr. Chair.
Okay. You want to ask?
Secretary Beavers, are you there?
Yes.
Did you hear my question about the clarification on adjacent counties and how the handbook differs from the recommendation?
I sure did. And to respond to that, our interpretation was that they could sell or they could deliver in the same county or the adjacent county. And an adjacent county would be a county that touches the county that the on-premise licensee is located in. So that was our interpretation that was in the handbook.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be kind of clear on the recommendation that we're making here. We're just making the recommendation today that we have the appropriate committee review the statute. Is that really what we're doing here? Okay, just make sure.
No, that is a recommendation that the appropriate committee, and what we're going to do when we refer it to a committee, we're going to send all the testimony we received to that committee. And should a bill be introduced, it'll have our recommendations, but of course they're an independent body. The committee will make its own determination of whether or not to amend the bill or to not pass out the bill. Yes, Senator?
Just for clarification, could a for-hire trucking service deliver the alcohol from the liquor store to the establishment? Secretary? Excuse me.
I'd have to look at a statute right quick, but I believe the retailer is responsible for doing the delivery. I would like to double check that though and get back to the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I wasn't confused on this. So we're not actually, the recommendation is just that we review the statute. We're not actually making a recommendation, we open it up statewide or anything. That's not a recommendation. Our recommendation is to review the statute to see that.
And see if there is a conflict, and if not, try to resolve that conflict.
Absolutely perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further on the motion? Motion has had a motion been made in a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Ayes do have it. Do you wish to have your vote recorded? Seeing none. Now, one other issue that's come up, and I'm going to leave it to the committee. I don't want to pre-guess what you want, but it talks about the, we had it on the alcoholic candy. If there's a motion to explore that, I will entertain it. But it will be up to a committee member, and if not, I'm going to pass it. Yes, Representative Carmichael, you wish to make a motion?
Mr. Chair, I know you asked for a motion, but I think before lunch, we also thought we might get Ms. Beaver's input on the topic about between 0.5 and 1.
She's on. Please ask her question.
I don't know how much, Ms. Beavers, you could hear this morning of what Mr. Duncan shared with us about the candy. Can you just try to give us a quick rundown of what the limits are, 0.5, 1, or higher, and who regulates what?
Yes, I will be happy to. I was able to hear Mr. Duncan's comments, and ABC does regulating the manufacture of 0.5 and up. We also regulate the retail sale at 1% and above. And I do agree with Mr. Duncan. There is an area there that is gray between what is manufactured and then what we regulate. So anything that is 0.5 to 1% can be sold anywhere. without any regulation.
Was that helpful?
It is, but I'm not smart enough on the issue to make an appropriate motion.
Thank you. One other issue is home delivery. Was there any consideration by the committee of whether we should make a recommendation as to home delivery? Seeing none, we will make no recommendation. One other issue was the franchise agreements. Any recommendation as to the franchise agreements? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a question. Wanted to clarify something from last time. These franchise agreements, they can be canceled, right? If there's like certain targets that they got to hit, it could be canceled.
Well,
They
the
missed them.
testimony was that anyone that's asked to get out of one has been able to get out of one. That was the testimony that we heard. I think the conflict was that the parties believe that a contract should be between the two parties and not between the state and the two parties. Well, the state has certain languages, a certain language and statute that they've got to use or got to comply with. But as far as the franchise agreements, the testimony was that if in the past, and I think since we've got the director on, would that be correct? Was that correct? When people that have asked to get out of a franchise agreement have always been able to get out of them?
I can't say for certain that all of them have been able to get out of them. But again, there was only 8 lawsuits that were filed. I believe there's been some the disagreement between the distributor and the supplier were resolved and therefore no change was made. And then there have been instances where the change was made. But the state has no decision in this. This is a contract between the two parties. We're more of a custodian of these franchise agreements.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. I think this is an area that needs further study. And I'm not going to make for a formal motion, but I think it should be the recommendation that the appropriate committees, either in the Senate or the House, further explore this franchise agreements. A number of states have them, a number of states do not have them. And so I'm not going to ask for a formal motion, but I will tell you that we're going to look at this a little closer and see what's going on. But with that, any other issue that you think the committee needs to take up? I think we've handled all the issues. Yes, of course, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You did permit me to discuss this in general terms about the impact of alcohol on violent crime. But let me put this into a formal motion, run it up the flagpole, see if anybody salutes. I would move that we include in our recommendations a recommendation that the Kansas Legislature continue to be aware that there is a relationship between alcohol and violent crime and mental illness, and that the legislature continue to diligently monitor those societal effects of alcohol so that in the event legislation should be necessary in the future, the legislature would be prepared to take that up.
Thank you. And that's in the form of a motion, is that correct?
It is.
Thank you. Second, Senator Dietrich. Any discussion on it? Yes, Senator Rowley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And what committee should be that assigned to as a recommendation?
Well, I don't want to usurp the authority of either the Speaker or the President, and so I'm not really asking that there be legislation introduced. I'm just saying as a general proposition, the legislature needs to continue to be diligent in monitoring the collateral effects of alcohol consumption.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. That will be included in the report, Representative. I just got handed a note. There was one part that we've not taken up with the urban wineries. The committee recommends that the legislature study the possibility of establishing an urban winery license. That's what we talked about this morning. And this is only a recommendation that the legislature continue to study it. I'll look for a motion, or I'll make the motion. Yes, question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you define urban winery? And would this urban winery be included in our agritourism?
I'm not sure it would be included in our agritourism, although there may be, and I'll look to Matt on that.
If I recall correctly, this suggestion of an urban winery came from Mr. Bradley. He testified, he made a recommendation and is trying to address some of these farm winery concerns. The option of creating this new license class for urban wineries, which would not have any kind of agricultural requirement, whereas you then you would have a farm winery that would have the same requirements as the urban winery, but then these additional agricultural requirements. So he was trying to make a distinction in the licenses. Something that could be explored about that would also then maybe be an evaluation of whether an urban winery could then operate an agritourism activity or not. But that would probably be things to be ferreted out in any possible legislation with this. But I think that's the genesis of this was a recommendation from Mr. Bradley on creating this new class of license.
Thank you. Anyone wish to make the motion? If not, it's a subject matter that we talked about this morning. I'll make the motion that the committee recommend that the legislature or appropriate committee study the possibility only of establishing an urban winery license that would have no Kansas agricultural requirement. Second, Representative Tarwater.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question or just a.
Is that a second first?
I have a question first, if you don't mind. Would that be able?
Normally, I do discussion after the second.
Well, okay, then I'll second the motion, and so we can have discussion.
I like to follow the rules.
All right, I don't. And that's why I'm always in trouble up here and you're not. So, okay, so my question is, could that be lumped in with the first farm winery recommendation because it's similar in nature and it's just an extension of the farm winery if it could be done?
And that's the reason I did not address it, because I thought it was all inclusive. But Connie sent me a note saying you didn't address it, so that's the reason I brought it up at last. I thought it was all inclusive with the wineries in general, but
I would think it would be, and I would think whatever committee that would be assigned to would consider that. But I'll go ahead and second the motion, and we can vote to at least have that discussion.
I have a motion, a second. No further discussion. Looking to my right, looking to my left, seeing no other. Looking to WebEx, I see no hands up. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. It passes. Is there anything else that the committee would like to raise? Senator, please.
I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for us to include in our interim committee report a statement that we continue to support our three-tiered system because it's working so well in Kansas, and that we're not recommending that any changes be made.
I would agree with you. I don't think we need a motion on that. I think, but Jordan, in the report, we probably need to list that we're very supportive of the three-tier system. It's worked, and it continues to work. So Jordan will have that and make sure that that's in there, that that's consensus of the committee, that it does work and it continues to work. Anything else for the good of the committee? Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we need a motion or anything on this, but I would say that all the interested parties are here in the room. We've seen a desire from our constituents for delivery of some sort, whether it be from a liquor store, grocery store, direct to consumer to help support some of our smaller distilleries. We've discussed all of this. We've seen that we're one of only 7 states that don't do it. I understand that it's a tricky situation, and with the three-tiered system, it could be near impossible to do. But I would like to ask all of the interested parties to try to get together and come up with some sort of solution, whether it would be the liquor stores doing delivery along with the grocery stores, even if it was a mail order type thing, maybe the distributors could do the mailing. That way and also include the liquor stores and however we could make it work. I think we need to take a look at it least to try to figure out a way, because that's our constituents are being trained for delivery of some sort in every single industry. So I think it would behoove the liquor industry to at least look at it.
And I can assure you, there'll be a bill introduced next year about home delivery. And you know, it will be granted a hearing, and then we'll have to go from there, along with the possibility of the other portions that we've not passed out, but we've learned quite a bit about. So I think that, you know, that's a good statement, that it's coming, and it may be addressed in a regular session, but there was no motion here, so we can't recommend it. But the franchise agreements will also come up next year. There'll be a bill introduced. I think the priority will be given to the bills that this committee recommends. And that doesn't mean the other bills will not be introduced or heard or worked. But is there anything else for the good of the committee? Representative Carmichael? Thank you. You're always on top of things. Yes. If there's nothing else for the good of the committee, we stand adjourned, and thank you. You've all worked really hard. I think we've got something accomplished. We'll see when the legislative session starts up in January. Thank you.